we're here to talk about something that people, broadly speaking, do not like, which is taxes. And we're going to talk about taxes in Portugal in particular. But before we move forward with Portugal, I think it's important that we try to understand that basically there are two different ways for countries to tax crypto. And basically we have the aggregated and we have the flat tax. So I knew that we did not have much time for this, so I made it very simple. But I wanted to show to you how different countries across Europe have implemented quite different tax rates. And I'm just talking about tax rates. I'm not going to even talk about, the small details where basically lawyers make their money, which is on the discussion of small details. So basically, I just want to show this to you that we have like countries like Germany, where if you hold the crypto for more than 1 year, you don't pay taxes, which means that basically there's an assumption from the German legislator that if you hold the asset for more than 1 year, you clearly not trading or not speculating. You have like a long-term vision on the use of the investment. While if you do this in less than 1 year, if you're buying and selling, you're going to pay up to 45%, which basically means a lot of money when you put the risk and the taxes that you put on the table. So the same applies for Luxembourg, but in this case, it's only 6 months. Still, there's a big risk in terms of speculation. But the truth is, not all countries take the same approach, which basically means that if you go to Slovakia, you have aggregated taxation up to 25%, between 19 and 25, which basically means that these are countries that have broadly speaking, compared to most of the other European countries, have a quite low aggregated taxation rates. But then we have Denmark, where it can go up to 52%, which means basically that you literally have a partner when you're investing. And then, well, I don't want to go into each of the cases, but you have like Lithuania, where if you make more than 28K, you're going to pay 20% taxes. Cyprus, full aggregated system up to 35%. Spain is interesting because if you're very successful and if you have a lot of money on crypto assets, in addition to paying the aggregated tax of 28%, then you're subject to wealth tax, which basically means that even if you don't make any profit, you're going to be paying money out of the potential amount. And we have also a very interesting case of the Netherlands, where basically the way you pay taxes is calculated on an assumption by the government on an expectation of revenue. So basically, if you make if you don't sell any assets, but if it has increased less than X, you don't pay any taxes because the government considers that you're not making enough money to pay taxes, but there's an expectation of the government that you will pay taxes above a certain threshold of revenue. So it's very complex on the Netherlands, and I think the Netherlands are very pragmatic also. I was really surprised to see that they have implemented this sort of system. So let's move into the flat tax cases, where basically you have Slovenia, that currently I think we can call it tax haven, and they went to the parliament trying to have a 10% flat tax, and it was refused by the government. I think that, well, not by the government, by the parliament, but clearly I think there's a vision of the country that for the time being there's no consensus on how to tax this sort of assets. So basically, then we have Romania and Bulgaria, 10%, not bad, actually one of the best. So we have Czech Republic, 15%. This is flat tax, so either you make a lot of money or just a little bit, you always pay the same rate. So Greece and Hungary, 15%, Poland, 19%, Slovenia, 20%. Then we start to have like the less attractive cases of Italy, Austria, France, where it can go up, if you're doing this on a professional basis, it can go up to 45%. And again, professional basis, you don't have to be a professional, just have to meet certain criteria to be qualified as professional. And then, Finland, but I think in Finland this is not a problem for them because they are used to high taxes. And then Sweden, Belgium, and then Ireland, 33%. So the main conclusion that I wanted to show to you here with these two slides is that A, there are a lot of options in terms of how to tax crypto gains. Second, there is a clear inconsistency across Europe, which basically this means that there's a big incentive for people to move from one country to another inside Europe. I'm not even talking about Dubai, I'm just talking inside Europe. There are plenty of reasons why you should move from one country to another inside Europe, especially if we consider that to meet the taxation criteria, you just have to be half of the year in that particular country. So basically you can continue to see all your friends, visit your family, and basically pay taxes where, let's say, you deem appropriate. So this is like the background where Portugal is competing, okay? Because in the end, taxation in relation to the crypto sector, it's all about competition between countries. So I think it's important that we understand that in Portugal, we are not that sophisticated, or we do not have that many years of experience when it comes to dealing with the taxation of crypto gains. Why? Because basically in 2016, it all started with a ruling issued by the tax authorities where they said that gains from crypto assets didn't fall in what we call category G, which basically it's capital gains. So capital gains based on crypto were not being taxed. And basically, if you go to Lisbon, I'm sure a couple of you guys have already been in Lisbon, and if you go and talk to the crypto community, you see a lot of American guys and all that. And the reason why those guys are in Lisbon is because of this ruling. Because for many years, they were based in Portugal, not paying taxes. It is important, however, to note that, as always, Portuguese tax authorities have, in a lot of occasions, issued private rulings, because basically you can ask a request to the tax authorities and they will give you an answer just for you. So, and on this one-to-one relationship, in a lot of cases, the tax authorities have been contradicting. There has been some contradiction between the ruling that I've mentioned and what they were writing there, which is basically obvious and normal because tax authorities, when they issue this sort of private rulings, they always take the most offensive approach. And for their benefit, they always give some inconsistency so that in the end they can say, oh, we want to tax you. But trust me, this is, I've been there, so I know how it works. And but the point is, there was like this beautiful oasis that basically, if you go to Santos area in Lisbon, you would certainly meet a lot of people that have benefited from it. In relation to corporate tax, the question is easier to understand, which is you're a business, you make profit, you pay taxes, you're a business, you don't make profit, you don't pay taxes. So there's no exemption, so to speak, on the asset that you have on the table. Where things get really interesting is on VAT and stamp duty. Why? Because basically, under Portuguese tax rules or principles, if you prefer, when you pay VAT, you don't pay stamp duty. So basically, there's like this there's this conception which is VAT is because it's not dependent on profit or revenue, is basically a tax that is related to the transaction per se, and stamp duty in a lot of cases applies to the transaction. Why am I bringing the VAT issue here? Because a couple of you, I'm sure, have heard of the European Court of Justice decision, the Handvins case. And in this particular case, even the European Court of Justice, okay, this was in 2016, but even in the European Court of Justice was able to issue a decision that was far from being crystal clear, but that ultimately admitted that certain transactions, when they were in that particular case, could be subject to VAT, although it benefited from the exemptions of VAT, but it was subject, but then it was on the list of the exemptions. This is important because it opened the door for an interpretation on application of VAT, and the application of VAT in Portugal would say that basically some entities were paying and charging VAT while others were paying and charging stamp duty, which is inconsistent, but this is what we had. And let us be honest, the problem was that the Portuguese tax authorities were never able to print it in bold, in a clear way, saying how to tax this, because I'm not sure if the guys inside the authorities clearly knew what they were talking about, so it was better for them to be silent other than to say something where they would look ridiculous or where there would be a big impact on the market. So what we have now, I tried to make this very, very simple, and basically, number one, crypto-to-crypto transactions are excluded. So only when you convert from euro to crypto, you would have to pay taxes, okay? Second, NFTs, because this is something that people always talk. There's a big void on this, so the authorities have never issued any ruling. So for the time being, I think we can say that it's not bad. The risks are low on being taxed on NFTs issues. Another important thing, FIFO is clearly the rule. It has been the rule on basically all capital gains related issues. So FIFO, don't try to be clever on this, because for them, for the tax authorities, that's easy to understand. Corporate tax, nothing special, more of the same as any other company in Portugal. Currently 21%. Believe it or not, we're discussing in the state budget if we should change this to 20. So it's 1%, it's a big discussion, and basically it's one of the reasons why there's a risk that the budget will not be approved, because something as silly as 1% on corporate tax. So let's go to where basically the big drama happens, which is income tax. So the rule is flat tax or no tax at all if it's held for more than 1 year. Not bad, especially if we consider that you can carry your losses for 5 years. So basically, if this year you're losing a lot of money and next year you're making a lot of money, you can compensate it. So it's good news. The legislator has decided also to regulate when it comes to professional activities. And the problem with professional activities is, as you know, if you're buying and selling on a daily basis, are you carrying out a professional activity or not? Even if it is for your own benefit and purpose. So we have two regimes. Basically, if you're what I would call a small company, and your revenues are higher than 200K, you have the regime, you have the progressive rates, which go up to 48%, which is, you're going to be surprised, which basically, I think everyone pays 48% in Portugal, because the rates are so low that basically for European standards, if you make like 100,000 euros per year revenue, you, like a family, you would probably pay a rate of 48%. Okay, so the problem in Portugal is not the rate, is that it's very easily you reach the highest rate. So if your revenues are higher than 200K, you go and most likely you're going to end up paying 48%. If your revenues are below 200K, here you have the benefit of what is called coefficients. And basically, if you're mining, 95% of the revenue generated with mining will be subject to tax. But if you're doing what the legislator calls crypto operations, only 15% will count for the purposes of paying taxes, which is like very attractive. But there's a problem, which is there's a category of, for the provision of services, your coefficient is 35%. this basically means that there's a lot of room for the legislator to say, I know that you're not mining, but I think what you're doing is provision of services and not crypto operations. So there's a lot of discussion here, of course, amongst people that like to discuss this, and I'm not going to bother you with this, but there's a risk that the 35% rate will apply. What are the implications of the current regime? Basically, VASP, need to report crypto transactions. That's a problem. There's no form for it. So basically, we don't know exactly how we're going to do it. But honestly, to some extent, I understand what the Portuguese legislature is doing because of the DAC 8 directive. I'm sure that a lot of people during this conference have already mentioned it. Because of the DAC 8, there will be like a sort of more rules and more standard and more practice on how to properly implement this. So I think that's what the Portuguese legislature is expecting. Stamp duty. Interesting because basically I've already mentioned the issues between stamp duty and taxes. And stamp duty and VAT. We pay currently, stamp duty is 4% on the commission. So if there's no commission, how are we going to do this? Okay, and this is interesting because it will bring us to the cases of donations. If I decide to give my daughter some crypto, am I supposed to pay stamp duty or an inheriting tax related to that? So there's a lot of inconsistency here between stamp duty and donation or non-family inheritances, because non-family inheritance by definition pay taxes. I'm not sure how the legislator is going to solve this, but there's a risk here on how can we use this as a legacy for our relatives. And basically what I would say today to someone that is like 80-something years old and wants to do, and is worried about, they could die any moment, actually just like all of us, but if you're 80-something, probably what I would recommend is that you try to convert into fiat so that you have more certainty on the current taxes that will apply. Okay? So the legislator did not go into deep when it comes to analyze this. Also important, the Portuguese regime has anti-abuse laws, so if you cannot benefit from the special regime below 200K that I mentioned, if you probably have a tax, if you're in Dubai, okay, so you cannot play with those regimes. Like, I'm based in Dubai, but I'm doing a professional activity in Portugal, so I will send the money to Dubai. No way it's going to work. And also, this is particularly relevant for the Americans that are based in Lisbon. If they decide to leave Lisbon and they have a gain, the gains will be taxed, even if they're not doing the transaction. Okay, so to some extent makes sense because basically the government wants to say, for the moment that you are here, you have had an increase in your assets, in your total assets, so you're going to have to pay taxes for it. Okay. So let's go into, okay, I'm behind schedule. So let's go into the few issues that I think that are important for us just to think. It's just a question of time for VASPs to know how to communicate operations related with crypto assets. Clarification on stamp duty limits and details, like if it's a gift, is it subject to stamp duty or not? Because stamp duty only applies on the prices of the transaction. So, and I've used the expression stupid tax because I have politicians saying that stamp duty is a stupid tax. So we need to know how when we give away to each other some coins, like, buy a pair of shoes and receive some Bitcoin. Okay? What's the taxation on this? No one knows. Because basically there's no service being charged. Also, how will VASPs pay? Who's going to be responsible if suddenly Avast decides not to pay stamp duty. So is it the owner of the coin or not? It's not clear, and I believe this will bring a lot of issues if suddenly the authorities decide to change this part. So let's now talk about the future and what makes sense. So the question is, when you look into taxation, taxation is not just getting more money. Taxation is part of a vision for the country. And when it comes to crypto, of course, in Madeira, the first question that we should ask ourselves is, why don't we create a sandbox in Madeira to increase the use of crypto and to leverage the free trade zone benefits? This would allow more digital nomads to come to Madeira. This would allow more investment on ERD, on research and development and collaboration with the local universities and local institutions, because basically the free trade zone is a regime that is approved by the EU. So basically we could make Madeira one of the biggest labs in Europe for crypto, because there's a tax regime for incentives, and because it's a very limited area, we could easily create a sandbox, like in Madeira or in Porto Santo, which is an island nearby. Crypto payments have a special regime, or can be done by everyone, where basically there would be like a sort of a system where the volatility of the assets could be controlled, for instance. So there's a lot of things where we need to find solutions, and Madeira or Porto Santo could be the perfect laboratory for that if we connect this to the free trade zone. Because I believe that if you have tax benefits, there is a lot of reasons for you to invest in a particular area. Second, why should we pay taxes the same way if renewable energies and non-renewable energies are being used? Why don't we make the use of renewable energies an incentive, or we give a tax benefit so that the use of these energies is more consistent than what we have today? Today, we don't have any answer for this, but I think as a government, this should be and has to be on the table. We cannot treat the same way the electricity, the energy costs, if they come from renewables or not. And finally, it's always the same question, which is, what is the vision? How can we correct politicians' myopia, that basically they are more concerned about making sure that some political parties are happy because we are taxing a couple of Americans living in Portugal, while in the end, what we need is, why should we give a special benefit for crypto assets? And the question is, do we want Portugal to be a top place where this sort of technologies are being developed, where we have a lot of innovation? And basically, I think when we have conferences like this one, is basically the reason why conferences like this one matter, because it is in conferences like this one where we have ideas, where we can create a sort of a lobby to, on a medium-term approach, create ideas and models that will be able to be explained to the politicians, and the politicians will be able to take this to their offices and then reshape the legal system so that the legal tax system that we have can properly incentivize the use of cryptocurrencies. Thank you very much. It was this. Thank you.